Good evening and welcome to Professional Portal. My name is Ryan Hiller and my co-host here is Darcy Tucker. Thank you for joining us. Today our topic is building positive relationships.
Great! That is a skill all professionals should take time to invest in.
Yes, they should. Whether you're a part-time or full-time, working in your chosen career, working retail, or waiting tables while you finish your education, building positive relationships is the key to getting the most out of yourself and opening up doors to opportunities.
I know positive relationships make my life more enjoyable because people want to be with people they enjoy being around.
I actually follow that, and you're right. To build positive communications, you need to use effective communication skills. In today's world, we send, receive, and process hundreds of communications every day. But effective communication is about more than just exchanging information. It combines skills like nonverbal communication, attentive listening, the ability to manage stress, and the capacity to recognize and understand your own emotions and those of the person you're communicating with.
Now that sounds like a lot to do. I'm sure it takes time and effort to develop communication skills and build positive relationships.
It really does. And the more effort and practice you put in, the more instinctive and spontaneous your skills will become. To help out our viewers, we've done some research and have some tips that you can use to start building positive working relationships using effective communication.
Later, we also have a special guest visiting us, Dr. Dean. But what's the first tip for us, Ryan?
Be professional and friendly. It sounds like a no-brainer, right? But take time to think through what professional boundaries are and connect professionally and try to stay within those boundaries. Take an interest in your coworkers and they will return that interest. It makes for a pleasant workplace, and who doesn't want that? The next tip is to listen, and listen some more.
That's a good one. Nobody likes to be around a conversation with someone who just talks loud and never considers another person's opinion. If you don't take the time to listen to your coworkers, you are being disrespectful.
Listening is actually the #1 communication skill. Successful listening means a lot more than just understanding the words and the information being communicated, but also understanding how the speaker feels about what he or she is communicating.
Okay, I can see that. Effective listening makes the speaker feel heard and understood, which I'm sure builds a stronger connection between you two.
Right. If your goal is to really understand and connect with the other person, listening should just come naturally.
But sometimes it is just so hard and boring to listen. I know it's important at work, but if it's difficult to listen to someone, do you have any tips?
Of course I do. First, you should focus fully on the speaker, their words, and their body language. If you're daydreaming, checking text messages, or doing anything else, you're going to miss something. If that doesn't work and you really just can't focus, take the time to concentrate on the speaker's words and repeat them in your head. It really works. It makes you hear what's being said and it helps you to stay focused.
Yeah, I've actually tried that and it does work. Another tip is don't interrupt. I like to think it's all about me, but sadly, it isn't all about me. Listening isn't the same as waiting for your turn to talk. You can't concentrate on what someone's saying if you're forming what you're going to say next. And the speaker can read your facial expressions and know your mind's elsewhere. Awkward.
That's very true. Instead, you should show interest in what's being said. Body language conveys more than we want it to sometimes, so you need to be aware of your own. Nod and smile, and make sure your posture is open and inviting. Encourage the speaker with yes or uh-huh. When we communicate, we use a lot of nonverbal signals. In fact, according to the University of Illinois Extension Statistics, first impressions are made up of 55% appearance and body language, another 38% is the tone of voice you use, and 7% is what you're actually saying.
Oh my, that is amazing. Only 7% are words, and the remaining is tone, appearance, and other nonverbal communication? Wow.
It really is amazing. I recently read a book called Understanding Interpersonal Communication by Richard West and Lynn H. Turner. It's all about nonverbal communication and body language, including facial expressions, body movement and gestures, eye contact, posture, tone of voice, and even muscle tension and breathing. The way you look, listen, move, and react to the other person tells them more about how you're feeling than words do alone.
In order to build those positive relationships, you need to understand and use nonverbal communication to connect with others and express what you really mean. Open, welcoming body language is arms uncrossed, standing with an open stance, and maintaining eye contact with the person you're talking or listening to.
The best way to learn about body language is to observe people in public places. Go to a shopping mall or even a restaurant. Observing how others use body language helps you to understand how nonverbal signals when you're talking with other people.
But aren't there different meanings and gestures based on where a person is from?
Yes, and you need to be aware of individual differences. People from different countries and cultures may use different nonverbal communication gestures, and people in different emotional states or ages might too.
Remember though, anyone can slip up occasionally and let their eyes roam or cross their arms without meaning to. So consider the signals as a whole to get a better understanding of the speaker.
Overall, just smile, maintain your eye contact, and listen attentively to build positive relationships. Also try to eliminate nervous gestures like hair twirling, clothes picking, shaking your feet, and saying and
I know, those can be so annoying.
Annoying, and they undermine your credibility in a meeting or interview. Make sure your nonverbal signals match your words. Body language should reinforce what's being said, not contradict it.
Yeah, when your words say one thing and your body language says something else, it makes you look dishonest. Like the presenter who says the company's doing so well, but yet he's sweating bullets and darts his eyes around nervously.
Exactly. And you should adjust your nonverbal language to the audience or the situation. Your tone of voice should be different talking to a child than when you're presenting to a group of adults.
Posture is a big deal too. Good posture makes you look confident and in control, while bad posture can distract people from what you're trying to communicate. And honestly, sometimes you have to fake it even when you are nervous. You can use body language to convey positive feelings when you're not actually experiencing them. Like if you're nervous about a situation, say a job interview, a presentation, or even a first date. You can use body language to signal confidence even when you're not feeling it.
Oh, absolutely. Don't enter a room with your head down and your eyes averted and slink into a chair. Stand tall with your shoulders back, smile and maintain eye contact, and deliver a firm handshake. It'll make you feel more confident even if you're not. Our next step is don't be judgmental. You don't have to like the person or agree with his or her ideas, values, or opinions. Set aside your judgment and criticism to fully understand the person.
But what if you really don't agree with someone?
Then you pick your battles. If you have really listened to the viewpoint and still don't agree with it, find a way to work with him instead of working against him. It goes a long way to building positive workplace relationships.
Okay, I'm sure it's important to understand each person is unique too. You are guaranteed to find people completely different than you in the workplace.
Right, and again, just don't judge. Instead, get interested. Enjoy the unique aspects of your coworkers. You all have a common goal because you all work together.
So what about office gossip?
Don't do it, and just stay away from it. It can be tame or it can be poisonous, but either way it tears down relationships and loses the trust of those around you. Never put people down either to their faces or through gossip.
Yeah, you want to build relationships, not break them down.
So we've given you some helpful hints about behavior and about listening skills. Now let's talk about stress and how that impacts our communication and our ability to build positive relationships.
Like using body language to feel more confident. It's important to learn to recognize and reduce stress.
We all know that in small doses, stress can help you perform better under pressure. But if stress becomes constant and overwhelming, it can disrupt your ability to think clearly and act appropriately. When you're stressed, you're more likely to misread other people and communicate more negatively than you want or should.
I can relate to that. I felt stressed during a disagreement and then done or said something I really regretted later. If I feel myself getting stressed, do you have any ideas on how I can get some quick stress relief?
Sure. To deal with stress during communication, first you need to recognize that you're actually feeling stressed.
Oh, I know those signs. I work with someone who gets so stressed out, his muscles tense up and his hands clench. Sometimes he even gets a little short of breath.
Yeah, those are all signs. If you feel any of those things, take a moment to calm down before continuing to communicate. Take a few deep breaths and purposely relax your muscles. In addition to recognizing stress, another important communication skill used in building positive relationships is the ability to recognize and accept your own emotions.
Really? I guess I didn't really think about the emotional element, but I guess emotions do play an important role in how we communicate.
It's often the way you feel more than the way you think that motivates how you communicate. If you're out of touch with your own feelings, you'll have a hard time communicating your feelings and needs to others.
Okay, I get it. I sometimes get into stupid arguments, like at work, like who has to restock the copier, when it's really not the real issue.
Right. And being aware of your emotions helps you to understand yourself and others, and the real messages that they are communicating. People often ignore emotions like anger, sadness, and fear. Building positive relationships through effective communication depends on being connected with those feelings. Now we're going to welcome a special guest here today. He's the university chaplain at Aurora University, the director of campus ministry, and an assistant professor of history and religion. Please welcome Dr. Jonathan Dean.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good to see you guys.
Welcome. So you wear a lot of different hats at the relationship. Tell us about how you have to cultivate to be successful in your position with these folks.
Well, you're right, Ryan, to say that I have to build good relationships with a range of different people on campus. Primarily, I guess I would say students. Obviously, would be the first group to mention. As chaplain, I often have the privilege of being with students at particularly sort of momentous or difficult moments in their life, and being sort of cultivating the skills you've already talked about in terms of being a good listener and someone who sort of values people's stories and validates their emotions and their feelings can be really important. Beyond students, of course, I have to work with my colleagues on faculty and staff as well, and I try to, one of the things I love about my job at the Wackelen Center is that I get to sort of try and widen the sort of circles of ownership of the work that we do in terms of deepening conversations on campus about meaning and purpose in life. So I really enjoy that I get to work with a range of different people, and there are a very different set of skills that you bring to different relationships. I also have to spend some time with alumni too, and it's kind of always interesting to hear their stories about the university.
All right, great. When it comes to building positive relationships, can you explain the importance of body language and how they may be perceived by others?
Yeah, I think that you already covered some really excellent points about that. Anything that you do to give the impression that you're sort of closed in on yourself in terms of your body language and your posture gives the person you're talking to the impression that you're either feeling defensive about what they're saying or that you're hostile in some way. And so I've sort of learned, often by getting things wrong, to be honest, that a sort of an open posture is really helpful. It gives people permission to tell their story. It gives them the sense that you're comfortable with them and that you're interested in what they have to say. And you know, I don't think you can overestimate the importance of eye contact as well. You know, people who don't actually look at you when they're talking to you can be kind of give you the impression that, you know, they're being shifty or that there's something that's not being said. So those kinds of pieces of common sense, I think, help a lot.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. If you feel you're getting negative nonverbal feedback from your audience, how do you turn that situation around?
Well, I guess that depends on the audience. It happens a lot in class, obviously. And I think there are different things that you can try depending on the context and how appropriate they are. Sometimes simply just changing the pace or the tone can be helpful. Trying to engage with the people that you're communicating with can be really helpful. Maybe if you're detecting hostility or some negativity, just to ask them, you know, how they're responding to the material can be, or to the conversation can be helpful. Often I find that whether it's a one-on-one or whether it's talking to a group of people, if I'm experiencing that kind of sense that things are not going well, it's often a good idea to see what is going on and see what the reality of the situation is. So you can just ask people if that's appropriate. If it's a context in which that wouldn't be appropriate, sometimes it can help to do anything you can to sort of be more open and accessible. So for instance, if I'm, to use one example, if I'm teaching a class and I'm feeling that sort of feedback, then I'll often step from behind the lectern and try and sort of be more open and more directly engage with students, as one example. But in a one-on-one situation, simply sort of asking for feedback can be a brave but good idea. Yeah.
All right. Can you give us an example of a time when you experienced a negative professional relationship and how you made it positive?
Yeah, you know, these are situations, I guess, that we all have to deal with in our lives at some point. Before I worked here, I was a pastor, and the last job I had in the UK before I moved to Chicago was I was a pastor of a church which was actually a recent merger of two pre-existing churches. They had decided to form one congregation. I was very green and sort of fresh from seminary, didn't really know what I was doing, and began to get very frustrated with the ways in which, as it seemed to me, people's kind of pettiness was getting in the way of the sort of the bigger picture. And I found myself being kind of angry and even somewhat hostile with some of these people when they would come to me with what seemed like really, small and trivial complaints. And it dawned on me through the good advice of a more experienced colleague that actually just listening to the stories underneath all that frustration might be a good place to begin. So I tried to set time aside to meet with the people who are experiencing, things that they needed to complain about. We met over coffee. I asked them simply to tell their story. And what I learned through that exercise really was the extent to which people get really invested in institutions that they belong to, institutions of all kinds, from universities to churches to companies to whatever. They feel an investment, and they feel that, often that it's something that really matters to them. And you can go a long way to sort of beginning to overcome workplace difficulty, I think, when you just ask people to tell their story and you honor their story as being something that's valid. You may not end up agreeing with them, as you were saying earlier, you may still think they're wrong, but at least you'll have a more compassionate sense of why people act out sometimes in the way that they do. And in my experience, someone being asked to tell their story and being listened to and heard as they do so can be just enormously helpful and cathartic in moving a situation on. So that would be one example, I guess, of how I've sort of learned from experience in that way.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. You tied it into a lot of the things we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
What do you think are other important skills and tools to have when building positive workplace relationships?
I think it helps enormously to have a sense of humor. And most people do at some level, and it's some place where you can engage. But again, to echo something which I think I heard you say earlier, to be just genuinely interested in someone else, I think is a great way it's the only way to begin a relationship, to take the time to ask them questions, appropriate questions about themselves, and to be able and willing to listen to the answers that they give without interrupting, which is something that we all kind of feel the tendency to do. It sounds simple maybe, but I've recognized from the way in which other people have treated me well, here and in other places, that actually taking 5 minutes at the beginning of the day, not to go straight into your work, but to check in with your colleagues and to be really interested in the responses you get can make the world of difference.
All right, great. What about relationships outside of the workplace? Do different types of relationships require different types of communication skills and tools, like marriages, friendships, children, so on?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, some of the same things, but perhaps practiced more deeply. I'm not sure. The ability to be wrong is huge in very close, intimate relationships, I think. The ability not to be kind of defensive about ourselves, but to be open to the fact that we might sometimes get things wrong. I think that's huge, especially in close relationships like marriage. Parent-child relationships are very complicated, of course. But there again, I think at least having an awareness that you might be bringing something to the relationship or bringing something to the party, is really important too. In relation to our parents, we often kind of project all kinds of things onto them, but I've learned that often it's the projection that's as much of the problem as anything that they may have actually done themselves. So, obviously it's a different and more deep kind of context, but I think anything that we can do to be more vulnerable and to be more open in those kinds of relationships will enrich them.
All right, great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. You've given us a lot of great ideas today, and we have covered a lot of information here today.
Yes, we have. To sum it up, developing positive working relationships is important and actually simple to do. Be friendly within boundaries, listen a lot, be attentive to body language. What else?
Be respective of your coworkers, stress less, and be aware of your emotions, both your own and of others. That way you'll be in a great place professionally and personally.
Thank you, Dr. Jean, for joining us. And thank you guys. Have a great night.